Ah, Barakvar, the most beautiful place around. I really like it. It's full of dwarves and fire and trees, but also this floating guy. He's very powerful. Well, hello there. It's me, Yamina. And by me, Yamina, I mean it's me, a cat. How are you guys doing today? I recently got some new bits of armor here. I got some new gloves, which are really nice. I got some new boots, which look exactly the same. I also got a new shield. I decided to switch to shield and sword because a lot of the guides I was reading for classes, because I want to be the best knight I possibly can be, But a lot of them were saying that shield and sword was generally speaking a better combination, especially if you're trying to be like a good tank. And I want to be a good tank. I want to protect my friends. And I got these new shoulder pads, which I really like. Um, I really like that on this armor chest you can see the Knight of the Blazing Sun. The Blazing Sun. I love me some sun. Oops, didn't mean to do that. But I also got. This is kind of interesting. So one of the random people I talked to, because I randomly send people messages and I compliment them on their armor and stuff. Because this game does have like a lot of cool armor sets, so I'll be walking around the capital and things like that, and sometimes people will send me stuff. And one guy just sent me this. This thing is apparently worth um 100 gold or something like that. Didn't realize it. I accidentally clicked it and put it on. So yeah. So thank you very much for the gift, my friend. Oop, not what I wanted to do. I want to move it. Okay, it's not letting me move it, whatever. But for right now we're gonna so this is the current helmet I'm wearing. You can see here it looks a little bit like a Star Wars helmet, like I'm a Darth Vader lady coming into your house late at night going, "Hey, this is my sword. Would you like to join the dark side, maybe? Or maybe you would just like to give me some pets?" But instead, so this is what the really expensive helmet looks like. Ooh. Ah. Cream. 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 I mean, it's pretty neat looking. And it's only for level 10, so that's kind of cool. I kind of wish I could get it and then like send it to another like Knight of the Blazing Sun or sell it. Because apparently it was worth a lot of gold. But it's perfectly fine. I'll simply keep it for now and have some fun with it. And it's very nice that guy sent it to me. Um, there was a little bit of a language barrier. He was very nice, but as he was explaining things, I was having a kind of a hard time understanding what he meant for a lot of things. But he seemed very cool, and he was trying. I got that he wanted me to look at this and then maybe sell it or something like that. I didn't even realize he had sent it until I checked my mail and suddenly there was a helmet there, which was very nice of him to do. And right now we're in the Barakvar area. Barakvar is one of my favorite dwarf holds. My two favorites are probably Zufbar. I think it's Zufbar and Barakvar. I like the holds that are a little bit unusual. Like I like that this is well, you could actually go to the, because I don't think you can actually go into the hold. But I like that it's like a water area and dwarves aren't really famous for their tolerance of water. See, I always really like unusual type characters. I guess it might be my inner hipster cat or whatever it is. But I like making unusual characters and things like that. But I also almost always make female characters in most of the things I play. Part of this is just because I think it's really fun to make strong female characters. Like female characters that are running through like difficulties that we usually just associate with like male characters or male character difficulties, that sort of thing. And I do see quite often that there's thank you. Can I get something from you? Ooh, I need to level up my things. Here, let's turn these on too. I always, when I first come in, I always forget to turn on the things. The auras. The auras. I always really like characters that are unusual or that do things differently. So, for instance, like I like making a dwarf character that maybe he or she has some of the stuff and beliefs that a normal dwarf would have, but instead they like kind of go a little bit wacky and out there. Maybe like they prayed to their ancestor gods and the just like it just didn't work. It they just never had their prayers answered. Maybe they felt betrayed. Maybe they felt like things weren't really working out for them. But then maybe he or she happens to fall upon like Mermidia, since we're talking about Night of a Blazing Sun here, and he just decides to try praying to her, and it works. And it's because it works. He's just like, you know what? Like, yeah, I guess those are my ancestor gods, whatever. But this lady actually answered my prayers, and she's actually doing something for me, so I'll be dedicated to her. Or like an elf who, rather than being like kind of like aloof and arrogant about like other cultures. Ooh, a boar. Hello. Like rather than being aloof and arrogant about other cultures, instead like really wants to study them. Like they want to get like down in there and be like, hey, what is this like? It's part of the reason why I like my dark elf lady, because part of her the whole thing is that like she just kind of realized, though, being evil and doing all these other kinds of things. Why are there so many trolls here? It's a lot of trolls. But being evil and doing all that kind of stuff is like just not what she wants to do, right? She wants to, live her own life, and she like kind of meets a human person that she kind of develops some affection for, and then she's like, screw it, I'm leaving the dark elf peoples, and I'm going over here, and I'm going to fight for this new people. And then like maybe the new people take her in a way that her old people never did. Maybe she was an outcast before. And I really like those kinds of stories, though. I really like things that happen on the periphery. And part of the reason this is also interesting to me is because I am an amateur historian, an amateur in the sense of the word, like like they're, I guess, what was it, Vincent Price said the original sense of the word, like a lover of, because Vincent Price was saying that he was like an amateur art collector in the sense that he just loved amateur art. um and that really applies to me. I love learning about history, but what I really like learning about in history is like how people lived and like the little things on the periphery of stuff. Like, for instance, learning about like gay history, learning about like, okay, like we tend to act like people throughout time have never accepted homosexual people within their communities, or LGBTQ people just in general. And one of the things that can be very interesting is if you like look, you can see that there were actually quite a few periods where like there were plenty of gay people around and people just didn't really care, or they didn't really interact. One of the ones that was interesting to me is that there was I was reading the Franz Schmidt book, and that's like the guy who was like an early modern period executioner. And he had this there was a part in there where there was like a mention of like someone being brought in for like homosexual, or not homosexuality, but they were a homosexual and people knew about it. And like it wasn't exactly like they liked that he was, but a lot of people were just kind of like, just whatever. It's just kind of like, well, what's the problem really? Like most people don't really care about stuff like that. And it's interesting because you also have things like the pansy craze of, I think it's like the 1920s, and all these other little things, right? They kind of show you that people, because the image we have of people of like the 1920s and like the 1950s and all these other things is very, it, it lacks a lot of color. It doesn't make them out to be like real people. But if you read like the experiences people had from like the time period, and if you read like experiences of like different groups of people in these time periods, you can really grow and learn and see some very different things. Like I didn't really like the book Pimp by Iceberg Slim, but he's like this character who was a pimp in like the 1930s, and like if you read the book, you kind of get a different perspective on like the sexuality of like the 1930s and like how people actually interacted. Like there's a lot of things where it's like we say, oh, this is how it was, or this is how it typically was, and then everybody goes, okay, so that's all how it always was. It's like, no, 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 no. There is things like how it typically was, but then there's almost always stuff where it's like, you know, that doesn't mean that everything was always exactly like this. This is like the standard way, but it doesn't mean that people didn't do weird or unusual things. I mean, we could talk about, for instance, my interest in Hinduism and spirituality and stuff like that. You can always find that even in like the most, like even in societies that are very stringent, or religions that seem like they're very stringent, you can find people who come to it with new eyes and do bring new beliefs to it. Like Ibn Sabayin, for instance, is someone who talks about things like the unity of being. Actually, no, I think it's Ibn Arabi is definitely talks about the unity of being. I'm almost certain Ibn Sabayin does also talk about the unity of being, but like like basically like non-dualism to a certain extent. Like, and you can read about like all these different like Sufi poets who were like kind of like on the periphery of things. They weren't like, yeah, I mean, there were certainly Orthodox Muslims on the fact that they like prayed and they held a lot of very Orthodox beliefs, but they also, had these experiences with the divine that kind of put them on the outside of things. I just really like that kind of stuff because I think it shows us that we like to put people in boxes. We like to put like people of different cultures and just people of different groups and things like that. We like to put them in very simplistic boxes, and then we like to just kind of keep them there. We like to keep things simplest. What? 3000 what? Oh. Oh, is that the Greenskin camp? Oh, okay. I didn't realize. Oh man, that's kind of funny. But yeah, like people live very different lives. It's always like kind of like I keep meeting people who say that everybody in 40K is miserable. I'm like, I kind of understand that idea, but to me it seems like no, there's people who would probably be living at least okay lives. Like there are certain people who like I'm sure you've met them. No matter like what's going on, they're always kind of cheery about it, or something like that. Like we put all these categories and boxes on everything. We try to make everything have to be like this. That's why I like Yamina. I like having this character who kind of tries to step outside of her family's boxes, and she tries to integrate more into society, the society around her. But she also like still is her own person, and she's kind of on the periphery of a lot of things. And she is also like a woman in a typically male dominated field, and her fellow knights have come to respect her, but maybe some of the other guys who are just seeing her for the first time don't really know what to expect. And there's all kinds of things you can do playing with that. And she's also has the whole thing where she is Telian and Arabian mixed together, so people have like some odd feelings about that. And like one of the things I kind of like the idea of playing with is like she's traveling around the empire, and like as she's you know that's weird. Okay, that way. But as she's like traveling around, one of the things that kind of happens is people kind of make assumptions about her. They'll ask her things about like, well, if you're Arabian, does that mean that you can do like sand magic or something stupid like that? And then she has to like disabuse them of these ideas and notions, and like she's like a living example of like being like a mixture of different cultures and also be still existing within a culture. That stuff is just always very fascinating to me. And you can read a lot about like the periphery of society and like the way the periphery of society is viewed by people in like the majority type situations and things like that. Like part of the reason I'm almost always playing female characters is because I just like having female heroes. It's not that you can never see female heroes and that you never see women doing certain roles, but typically in media there's a much more, like especially for like action roles and stuff like that, there's a much greater prevalence of males, and just sometimes just making a character female can just make it a little bit different. um and it's also fun occasionally to just make somebody that's cute. I mean, boys can be cute too, and sometimes I make cute boys and go, oh boy, that's a boy, oh boy. But you can do all kinds of different stuff, and you can play with all kinds of different ideas, and just, and sometimes just like little things like that, like just playing a lady instead of a male, like, or like when I write stories, like writing a story about a lady instead of a man can change certain perspectives, and it can. Is that the Greenskin War Camp? It is. Okay, let's not go that way. I don't want to get shot again. Oh, hi, how you doing? Just hanging out? Why did they hang him on the side where nobody could see him? You want a drink? You thirsty? No, I'm good. Oh, okay. But just like having little things where you change perspective, it's very cool. And I think the thing I've learned running around on this big old crazy old planet we got is that there's always more to the story than you're probably being told. And things get very complicated. And sometimes there's a fairly simple narrative that you can kind of track, but there's a lot of times when things are just kind of crazy, where you're just kind of walking around and going, I just don't get it. I don't understand what's happening. And until you like really see like what it's like on the ground. It's like one of the reasons I like inside the belly of is it inside the belly of the beast? I'd have to double check. There's a Cuban news channel on YouTube, and they have stories from like inside Cuba, and I like that. I like watching the stories from inside Cuba and them talk to Cubans. And I think recently they had the vice president from not Cambodia, Colombia. I think it was Colombia. I was about to say Cambodia. I'm like, wait, Cambodia is completely different. Asia, not Asia. But just stuff like that is very interesting, and you can like really see and like really feel people's stories. And like if you've ever read a lot of historical biographies, I think you often get this idea of like, oh yes, and this man was so cool. Look at the way he was. He only behaved like this way. Like Stonewall Jackson is a good example of this, where like if you really read about Stonewall Jackson, there's a lot of biographies out there that basically make him to be this weird like southern saint. But if like Atun Shea's video is very good about this, where he pointed out that like the real Stonewall Jackson was kind of crazy. And if you can find out a little bit more about the man's life and see that yeah, he was kind of crazy, but that makes him more interesting to read about. It's way more interesting to me to read about like the guy who's kind of crazy, but like a lot of people just, hey guys, just hanging around doing skeleton things. But I don't know what that laugh was, but doing things like that. And the thing too is that I often talk to people who have a lot of problems. I try to help out. I basically do like free therapy for a lot of people. I just try to talk to them and stuff like that. And the thing that sometimes my more stable, or people who are in more stable positions, I should say, is probably the better way. Because if I just say more stable, it sounds kind of weird. But more stable positions, if I talk to them, they'll say things like, "Well, you should get to a point where you can just talk more with like people, like especially at work and stuff." Because I met a lot of crazy people at work, but because I'm a cat in a data center, meow. But anyway, um, do a lot of this kind of crazy stuff, right? And they'll tell me their stories about their lives, and there's a lot of crazy things going on. Sometimes they have problems that are just like really silly, where you're just kind of like, well, you kind of did that to yourself. And then other times it's just like, stuff happens, life happens. And sometimes I've been told like, well, you need to get to a place where you can, for people who are more normal. And the thing that's kind of funny about that is like, if you've been around long enough, if you really talk to people, if you really interact with people, even the ones that seem super normal, whatever, you often find that there's a lot more to them. There's a lot more to people. There, like we have this very surface level understanding and this very surface level like thing where row row fight the power. I like that fist. But like where we have basically a public persona where we're always trying to perform and act in such a way where people will accept us, and where like we seem to fit into a certain degree, and we might change like little things about ourselves. And then there's like our internal life where we have much more complicated views sometimes, or even sometimes more simplified views, all kinds of crazy things. There's all kinds of things that we have. Like there was basically a public persona, and there's an inner persona that is like a deeper thing. A lot of people, like if you can really get to know them and really start to talk to them more and more, you'll find that a lot of people who seem like bland and boring, they actually have more going on. Granted, I've met a few people who are just kind of like, I about as interesting as bran flakes, but they still deserve love and everything. But it doesn't necessarily mean like sometimes you talk to them for a while and you're just like, oh, you really are just that boring, huh? you know. But like people often have a lot of very interesting stuff going on, like in their like internal lives and things like that. And I like trying to bring that into characters, and I like trying to play those kinds of characters, the characters that would be on the periphery, the characters that would be different and unique, and things like that. Oh, I have so many empty tactic slots. I just know. Okay, we can fix that in a second here. But anyway, I don't know. I just felt like sharing that stuff and talking about it for a little bit while playing Yamina, one of my favorite ladies, and how cool and awesome she is. And look at my new shield. I don't necessarily know if I like that blue very much, but I think if I mixed more blue into this armor, I'm waiting until it's higher level before I really start decorating. Excuse me. Um, yeah, I like these new shoulder guards too. I like that it's not just on one shoulder. That was weird to me that the last one was just on one shoulder. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. And also, don't forget to be interesting, and don't forget to be lovable out there. And don't forget to give your cat a hug. And that's me. I'm your cat, so give me a hug. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. Have a great one.